You want to know what I remember? Cole's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. I remember the smell of his blood on my hands. I remember the way he grabbed my wrist and said, "Find her." I remember every single face of every single man who tried to make sure nobody ever would. He set his glass down, and I remember the name written on the last page of that notebook. The name none of you will believe. The name that's still out there, still walking free, still powerful. Nobody laughed, not yet. If this story hits you the way it hit me, subscribe to this channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The joke had been running for 6 years inside the Tucson chapter. Not a cruel joke exactly, more like the kind that grows comfortable over time, the kind that fills the silences between men who don't always know what else to say. It started simply enough someone would buy Cole a drink, someone else would lean over and whisper, ask him about the desert, and then the whole table would brace themselves and wait because they already knew every word that was coming. Ethan Cole Mercer was 71 years old, and he had been telling the same story since before most of the men in that room had their first motorcycle. He told it the same way every time, the same details, the same order, the same pauses in the same places, like a man who had rehearsed it so many times that the words had worn grooves into him. He told it on slow Tuesday nights when the card games had gone flat. He told it on hot summer Saturdays when the bar ran low on conversation. He told it on the anniversary of nights that only he remembered and nobody else had marked on their calendars. He told it whether people wanted to hear it or not. And the story was always this. In the spring of 1985, Cole had been riding alone through the Arizona desert on a route he'd taken 100 times before when he stopped at a motor court motel outside of Maricopa because the night sky had turned ugly and he'd smelled rain coming. He'd paid for a room in cash the way he always did. He'd parked his bike under the overhang the way he always did. He'd gone to the vending machine at the end of the row for a Coke the way he always did. And that was where the ordinary part of his night had ended. Because when he turned from the machine, he heard the sound. Not a gunshot, not yet. A sound before the gunshot, a body hitting the ground hard and fast the way a body sounds when it doesn't choose to fall. He'd heard that sound twice before in his life, and he hadn't liked it either time. He liked it less at a desert motel at 11:30 at night when he was the only other person in the parking lot. He'd found Daniel Marsh face down in the gravel between two parked cars bleeding from his side, still conscious, still gripping a leather briefcase, like his life depended on it, because Cole always said at this point in the story his life did depend on it. The gunshot had come from a room at the far end of the motel. Cole had dragged Daniel behind a truck. Daniel had grabbed his wrist and said 4 words that Cole had not forgotten in 40 years. "They're going to kill me." Cole had not run. That was the part that always surprised people the first time they heard the story. Not the violence that followed, not the names, not the notebook, but simply the fact that a man on a motorcycle in a desert parking lot had not gotten on that motorcycle and ridden away when a bleeding stranger told him there were armed men close by. "Why didn't you leave?" someone always asked. And Cole always answered the same way. "Because he looked at me," he'd say. And when a man looks at you like that, like you're the last solid thing left in the world, you don't leave him. 3 men had come out of that motel room. Cole had been ready. He'd had his tire iron, and he'd had 40 years of not being a man who backed down from a fight, and he'd used both. 2 of the men he'd put down hard. The third had run a man in a suit, a man Cole had looked directly in the face, a man whose name he had not known that night, but would come to know later. Daniel had survived the night. Cole had stayed with him until dawn, kept pressure on the wound, kept him talking, kept him conscious. When the paramedics finally arrived, called by a motel clerk who'd heard the commotion and waited a long time before picking up the phone, Daniel had pressed the leather briefcase into Cole's hands and said one more thing. "Don't let them have this, and find my daughter. Her name is Mara. Whatever happens, find her." Then the ambulance had taken Daniel Marsh away, and Cole had never seen him again. He'd spent the next several months trying to track the man down through every channel available to him, which were not many. He'd asked questions that made people uncomfortable. He'd followed leads that dried up in courthouse records and federal databases that nobody wanted to open for a biker from Tucson. He'd been told Daniel Marsh had died in protective custody. He'd been told Daniel Marsh had never existed. He'd been told once by a government man in a parking garage who'd made the meeting feel dangerous enough that Cole still thought about it, sometimes that the wisest thing he could do was forget the whole night and go home. He had not forgotten. He had not found Mara either. The briefcase was long gone, confiscated in circumstances Cole described differently depending on the night and how much he'd had to drink. But the leather notebook inside it, the one Daniel had pressed into his hands, separately wrapped in an oilcloth. This is the important one. This is the one they want that notebook Cole still had, or said he had. He'd never shown it to anyone. That was the detail that killed him every time, the detail that turned the story from something that made people lean forward to something that made people lean back and reach for their drinks, with the particular slow movement of men who have decided they are done listening. Because Cole always reaches to this point, the notebook, the evidence, the names of powerful men written in Daniel Marsh's own hand, and then he would stop. He would look around the room, and he would say with complete and unshakable conviction that he was keeping the notebook sealed until the right time, until the right person came along, until he was sure it was safe. Safe for who? Reaper had asked him once years ago now, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Safe for a dead man you met one time in a parking lot 40 years ago, Cole. Brother, listen to yourself. Reaper's real name was Victor Salas. He'd come up through the Flagstaff chapter 12 years ago and clawed his way to the Tucson vice president seat through a combination of sharp intelligence and an absolute refusal to lose any argument he started. He was 53 years old, broad across the shoulders, with a voice that could fill a room without effort and a way of listening to people that made them feel incorrectly that he was agreeing with them. He had heard Cole's story 4 times in the first year. After that, he'd stopped listening and started using it. Ask him about the notebook, Reaper would say to the newer guys, and then he'd sit back and watch Cole go through the whole thing again, and when Cole got to the part about keeping it sealed, Reaper would lift his hands in a helpless gesture that said, "There it is," without saying a word. Cole knew what Reaper was doing. He kept telling the story anyway. The Tuesday night it all changed had started like every other Tuesday night. Slow warm, the ceiling fan working against the heat. 6 or 7 guys at the bar and another 4 at the card table in the back. The television murmuring baseball scores that nobody was watching. Cole had arrived at 7, same as always. He'd hung his jacket on the second hook from the door, same as always. He'd ordered a beer he wouldn't finish, same as always, and he'd taken his regular seat at the far end of the bar where the light from the back hallway fell across the stool at an angle that let him see both the front door and the rear exit without turning his head. 40 years of habit, he'd never fully stopped watching doors. Drew Carver was already at the bar when Cole sat down. Drew was 26, 2 years a prospect before he'd patched in, and he wore his new membership with the kind of confidence that sometimes looks like arrogance from the outside and feels like joy from the inside. He was a good enough kid, Cole had always thought, just young in the particular way that made older men invisible. Drew glanced over when Cole sat down, and Cole saw the look that passed across his face, the slight flicker of resignation, the way a person's expression settles when they realize something slightly tedious is about to begin. The look was quick. Drew covered it quickly, but Cole had been reading faces since before Drew was born, and he caught it clean. Cole, Drew said, lifting his chin in greeting. Drew, Cole said. They drank in silence for a few minutes. The baseball game murmured. Someone at the card table said something that made the others laugh. Cole waited. He couldn't have explained if anyone had asked him why he still came here. The brothers of his generation were mostly gone dead, retired, relocated, scattered to different chapters across the state. The men who remained in this room were good men, most of them, but they were strangers to the version of this club that Cole had helped build from nothing back when the whole thing had been held together by loyalty and bad decisions and the particular kind of love that only exists between people who've survived things together. He came because it was still his club. He came because the story still needed to be told. He came because somewhere he believed, had always believed, could not stop believing, no matter how many rooms had laughed at him, somewhere the right person had not heard it yet. So, Drew said, and his voice had a particular lightness to it, the kind that means someone is about to say something they think is funny. You gonna tell us about the desert tonight, Cole? It's been a week, Gull. I feel like it's been at least 2 weeks. A couple of the other guys at the bar shifted, not quite smiling yet, waiting. Cole looked at his beer. The last time I told it, Cole said, you had questions about the notebook. I always have questions about the notebook, Drew said, because you never show it to anyone. 40 years, one piece of evidence never shows it to anyone. You gotta admit, brother, that's a little convenient, said one of the others from down the bar. That got a laugh. Cole didn't look up. It's not convenient, it's necessary. Necessary, Drew repeated, and the word in his mouth sounded like a soft parody of itself. Right, because of what was it, the lawyer? The powerful people, the whole network of bad guys who are definitely still out there waiting to come after a 71-year-old man because of something that happened before I was born. The card table had gone quiet. Cole could feel the attention of the whole room settling on him the way it always did at this point in the story, the way a crowd settles around a corner where something is about to happen. He had two choices, same as every time. He could get up and leave, or he could tell it again. He set his beer down. You want to hear it? Cole said, or you want to keep performing for the room? Drew's smile thinned. I've heard it, Cole. You've heard a version of it? You've heard the parts you were listening for. Cole turned on his stool to face the room properly. The movement was slow. His back had not been forgiving him lately, but he made it deliberate. You want to sit there and decide what's real from a stool you've been on for 3 hours? Fine, but that's not the same as listening. Then tell us something new, said a voice from the back. Marcus, one of the card players, a steady man in his 40s who didn't usually involve himself in these exchanges. If the story's real, Cole, there's got to be something you haven't said yet. It was a fair challenge. Cole recognized it as fair. He also recognized that it was the kind of challenge that once made had to be answered or surrendered. He looked at Marcus for a long moment. The name, Cole said. The third man, the one in the suit who ran. You've mentioned him before, Drew said. I've mentioned that he existed. I've never said the name. The room went still in a different way than it had been still before. Why not? Marcus asked. Because until I could prove it, Cole said. Saying the name would just be another detail nobody believed. He paused. The same way nobody believes The Notebook. The same way nobody believed Daniel Marsh bled out on my jacket in a desert parking lot while I held his ribs together with my bare hands and promised him I'd find his daughter. Cole, Drew started. I promised a dying man, Cole said, and his voice had dropped to something quieter and more dangerous than anything in the room, that I would find his daughter. I have been trying to keep that promise for 40 years. And every week I come in here and I tell this story because the only way to find someone, the only way is to keep saying the name of what you're looking for until the universe gets tired of you and puts it in front of you. He picked up his beer. So, you want to call me crazy? Go ahead. I've been called crazy by men I respected. You don't qualify. But if any one of you wants to actually hear what happened in that parking lot, I'll tell it. And this time I'll say the name. Silence. Drew looked at his glass. Marcus leaned forward. Reaper walked in from the back hallway. He had clearly been there long enough to hear most of it because his expression was already settled into the particular patient amusement he wore when Cole was performing, as Reaper always called it. What name? Reaper said. Cole looked at him. Buy me a drink, Cole said, and I'll tell the whole room. Reaper did not buy him a drink. He poured himself one slowly and leaned against the bar with the posture of a man who was granting a favor he had not agreed to grant. Go ahead, Cole, he said. Tell us the name. So Cole told it from the beginning. He told it the way he always told it, the motel, the vending machine, the sound of a body hitting gravel. But something in the room was different tonight, and Cole felt it. The attention was different. The quiet had a different texture. Maybe it was the name he'd promised. Maybe it was something else entirely that Cole couldn't identify yet. But the men in that room were listening in a way they hadn't listened in years. He told them about Daniel Marsh's hands, how they'd been shaking so badly he could barely grip the briefcase. He told them about the wound entry from the left side, deep, the kind of damage that puts a man down for keeps if he doesn't get help fast. He told them about crouching in the gap between the two parked cars, the gravel cutting his knees, Daniel's breathing in his ear like a man trying to convince himself he had more time than he had. He told them about the 3 men coming out of the room. 2 of them were hired, Cole said. You could tell they moved like professionals. They covered each other. They were efficient. The 3rd man was different. He came last. He stayed near the door while the other 2 swept the parking lot. He had a briefcase of his own, and he never put it down. He kept looking back toward the road like he was calculating his exit. Cole paused. He was the one giving the orders, and when I came out from between those cars with the tire iron, he was the one who ran. And the other two? Marcus asked. Didn't run, Cole said flatly. Nobody asked him to elaborate on that. The suit, the man with the briefcase, I saw his face for maybe 4 seconds under a parking lot light. But 4 seconds is enough. I'm good with faces. Always have been. Cole's hands tightened around his glass. I spent the next 6 years off and on trying to figure out who he was. I had descriptions. I had the timing. Who would have known about Daniel's location? Who would have had the connections to bring armed men to a motel in the middle of the desert at midnight? I cross-referenced every attorney connected to the federal cases Daniel had been witness to. And, Drew said. Cole looked at him. His name is Walter Pena, Cole said. He's been a practicing attorney in Phoenix for 35 years. He's been named in 3 federal investigations since 1990, and he's walked away from every single one. He has money connections and 40 years of believing that nobody can touch him. Cole set his glass down, because the only person who can put him at that motel in 1985 is me, and I'm an old man that nobody believes. The silence after that was the longest silence Cole had heard in that bar in years. Reaper was the one who broke it. Walter Pena, he said. He said it the way someone repeats a name to test how much weight it carries. That's a real name. He's a real man, Cole said. You're accusing a practicing attorney of attempted murder, Reaper said. A man with connections and money, on the basis of what you say you saw under a parking lot light for 4 seconds 40 years ago. I'm not accusing him of anything right now, Cole said. I'm telling you his name, because I said I would. He paused. And because the notebook. Cole. Reaper's voice flattened. Don't. The notebook has his name in it, Cole said. Daniel wrote it down, among others, Walter Pena and the names of everyone he worked for and what they paid to make sure a federal witness never testified. It's in there, dated, documented. His voice didn't waver. And it's been in my possession for 40 years because I didn't know who to trust with it. I still don't, but I know that the truth doesn't get smaller just because nobody believes it. Reaper looked at him for a long moment. You should go home, Cole, he said. Not unkindly, just finally. It's late, you've had a beer. Get some rest. The room exhaled. Drew looked away. Marcus picked up his cards. The baseball game returned from whatever silence it had been waiting in. Cole sat very still for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket from the hook by the door. The second hook, the one he'd hung it on for 20 years, and he walked out into the Arizona night, where the air was warm and dry and smelled like desert sage and motor oil, and the stars were exactly where they always were, indifferent and brilliant, and he stood next to his bike for a long time without starting it. He was not finished. He had never been finished. But tonight something felt different. He couldn't name it yet. He just stood there, keys in his hand, listening to the quiet, and for the first time in a long time, the quiet listened back. He rode home the same way he always did, the long way out past the edge of town, where the street lights stopped, and the road became just a strip of asphalt cutting through darkness, bordered on both sides by nothing but the desert stretching away under a half moon. He'd ridden this road so many times over so many decades that his body knew every turn before his eyes registered it. He thought about Daniel Marsh the way he always thought about him on nights like this, not as a memory exactly, but as a presence that refused to fully recede. A man he'd known for 6 hours, a man who had looked at him like Cole was the only thing standing between him and the dark. He thought about Mara Marsh, whose face he'd never seen, a little girl in 1985, which meant she'd be in her late 50s now, maybe 60. Old enough to have spent a lifetime not knowing what happened to her father, old enough to have given up. Or not. He had looked for her as long as he'd had avenues to look. He'd asked questions in the right places and the wrong ones. He'd followed threads that went nowhere. The federal witness program was impenetrable. The records were sealed. The people who might have known something were either dead or had learned very well not to talk. He'd never stopped. He still made calls sometimes. He still had contacts in places that weren't entirely official. He still had the notebook sealed in an oilcloth inside a fireproof box inside a locked cabinet in the back room of his house, exactly where it had been for 38 of the last 40 years. He pulled into his driveway and killed the engine and sat there in the sudden quiet. His phone buzzed. He looked at it, unknown number, Arizona area code, but no prefix he recognized. He answered it. A woman's voice. Is this Ethan Mercer? He went very still. Who's asking? My name is Mara, the voice said. My mother died 6 weeks ago. She left me a letter. The letter told me to find you. Cole's hand was absolutely steady on the phone. His heart was not steady at all. Say your last name, he said. A pause. Marsh, she said. Mara Marsh. And I think I have something that belongs to you. Cole sat in his driveway under the Arizona stars for a very long time after that. When he finally went inside, he did not go to bed. He went to the locked cabinet in the back room. He stood there with his hand on the combination, the familiar series of numbers he'd turned so many times the motion was pure muscle memory, and he listened to the quiet of his house around him. Then he opened it. The oilcloth was exactly where he'd left it. He didn't open that. Not yet. He just needed to know it was still real. It was. He went to the kitchen, made a pot of coffee. He wouldn't drink, sat at the table and waited for morning. Because in 40 years of telling a story that nobody believed, he had learned one thing above everything else. The truth doesn't die. It just waits for the moment when the right person is finally ready to hear it. And somewhere across this city, a woman named Mara Marsh was driving toward him with her mother's letter in her hands. And for the first time in 40 years, he didn't feel like a man talking to a room full of laughter. He felt like a man standing at the edge of something that was finally, after all this time, about to break open. She arrived at 6:40 in the morning. Cole had not slept. He'd sat at his kitchen table through the whole dark stretch of night, drinking coffee that went cold, listening to the house settle around him, the way old houses do. Small creaks, small sighs, the particular silence of a place that has held one person's secrets for a very long time. He'd thought about calling someone. Marcus, maybe. Someone who'd been in the room last night when he'd said Walter Pina's name out loud for the first time. Someone who could sit across from him and confirm that what was happening was real. He hadn't called anyone. This was not a phone call kind of moment. This was a moment you held alone until it became something you could share without it breaking. When headlights swept across his front window at 6:38, he was already standing at the door. She knocked twice, solid knocks. Not nervous, not the knock of someone who wasn't sure they were in the right place. Cole opened the door, and she was standing there in the early morning gray, a woman in her late 50s. Blonde hair cut practical and short, a leather portfolio bag over one shoulder, dressed like someone who'd been driving since before sunrise and hadn't stopped to think about what she looked like. She had the kind of face that had been beautiful once and was something better now, specific, settled, marked by years that had asked a lot of her. She looked at him for a long moment. You're older than I expected, she said. You're right on time, Cole said. Come in. She sat at his kitchen table and he poured her coffee, and she wrapped both hands around the mug like someone who hadn't been warm in a while, and for a minute neither of them spoke. Cole sat across from her and looked at her face and tried to find Daniel Marsh in it. He found the eyes the same particular stillness, the kind of eyes that were always measuring the room even when the rest of the face was at rest. Your mother, Cole said. Tell me about her first. Mara looked at her coffee. Her name was Carolyn. She spent 12 years in protective custody under a different name. After that, she came out, moved to Oregon, small town outside Medford, lived quietly. She remarried once, but it didn't last. She worked as a bookkeeper. She paused. She never talked about my father, not directly. I knew his name. I knew he'd been involved with a federal case. She said he died in custody. She said it was an accident. Her jaw tightened. She said it so many times I almost believed her. Almost, Cole said. She left me a letter when she died. 12 pages handwritten both sides. Mara looked up. She'd been holding on to the truth for 40 years because she was afraid. She told me everything in that letter. The witness program, the case against the people my father was going to testify against, the night he disappeared. She stopped. And your name? Ethan Mercer. She said a biker named Cole had been with my father when he was shot. She said my father told her that Cole had saved his life that night, that he had the notebook, that if anything ever happened, if she was ever in a position where the truth needed to come out, she should find you. Cole was very still. Your father told her about me, he said. He got one phone call through before they locked him down in protective custody. He called her. He told her about the motel, about the fight, about the notebook. He told her the notebook was the only copy of everything, names, payments, dates, and all of it. He told her to remember your name. Mara's voice did not break, but it came close. She remembered it for 40 years. She wrote it at the top of the letter. Find Cole. That was the first line. Cole got up from the table not because he needed to go anywhere, but because sitting still in that moment was past what he could manage. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to her for a moment, and he breathed and he reminded himself that he was 71 years old and had spent 4 decades telling himself this moment would come, and now that it was here falling apart in front of Daniel Marsh's daughter was not an option. He turned back around. She sent you with something, he said. You said on the phone you had something that belonged to me. Mara reached into the leather portfolio bag. She drew out an envelope, first thick, sealed old enough that the paper had gone soft at the edges. Then she drew out a photograph, black and white, slightly overexposed, the kind of photo that a cheap camera takes in low light. She laid both on the table between them. Cole looked at the photograph. Daniel Marsh was maybe 40 in the picture, lean and sharp-faced, wearing a jacket too light for the weather in whatever place it had been taken. He was standing in front of a car Cole didn't recognize, squinting into the sun, one hand raised to shade his eyes. He looked like a man who had made difficult decisions and made peace with most of them. He looked like the man Cole had held together in a desert parking lot. That's him, Cole said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. That's him, Mara said. Cole picked up the photograph carefully, the way you pick up something you're afraid of damaging. He looked at it for a long time, then he set it down. What's in the envelope? He asked. Pages from a journal my mother kept. Dated entries starting from the week my father went into protective custody. She documented everything he'd told her about the case, the names, the payments, the structure of the network. She didn't have the actual notebook, but she had his words. Mara slid the envelope across the table. She was terrified to keep it, but she was more terrified of losing it, so she kept it hidden for 40 years in a fireproof box under the floorboards of her bedroom. Cole looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. Your mother was a brave woman, he said. She was a frightened woman who did brave things, Mara said. There's a difference. She wrapped her hands around the coffee mug again. She wanted me to find you. She wanted me to give you this so you could put it with the notebook. She said together the notebook and her journal there might be enough to do something with. She said she'd been waiting for the right time for 40 years and then she ran out of time. Her voice dropped. She died 6 weeks ago, pancreatic cancer, 12 days from diagnosis to the end. I'm sorry, Cole said. She wasn't afraid at the end. That was the thing she was relieved, like she'd been holding her breath for 40 years and she finally got to let it go. Mara looked at him directly. She said you never stopped looking for me. Is that true? Cole nodded. It's true, he said. Why? She asked, not challenging him, genuinely asking. You didn't know my father. You met him for a few hours. You didn't owe him anything. Cole thought about all the answers he'd given to versions of this question over the years. The versions he'd given to himself, mostly on long rides through the desert, when the question had too much space to grow in. He thought about the answer he'd always come back to, the one that felt truest even when it seemed too simple. Because he asked me too, Cole said. And because when a man is dying and he trusts you with something that trust doesn't expire when the night ends. He paused. I've been in situations where I needed someone to keep their word to me. I know what it costs when they don't. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. Just that. Okay, like something that had been suspended for a very long time had just landed. I need to show you something, Cole said. Stay here. He went to the back room. The locked cabinet was where it always was. He worked the combination with hands that he noticed distantly were not entirely steady. He opened it. He took out the oilcloth package, the same one he'd checked the night before, the same one he'd checked 100 times over 40 years, with the same mix of relief and grief that it was still there, and still sealed, and still waiting for a moment that had never come. He carried it back to the kitchen and set it on the table. Mara looked at it. That's it, Cole said. I haven't opened it since 1987. I unsealed it once to verify what was inside, then I sealed it again, and I've left it alone since. He sat down. I want you to be here when I open it. You have a right to be here. She nodded. He unwrapped the oilcloth slowly, layer by layer. The leather notebook inside was dark with age, the cover warped slightly where moisture had gotten to it once long ago, the corners gone soft. The initials on the front cover were still visible. D.M. burned and not stamped. Cole set it on the table between them, and they both looked at it. He had his initials on it, Mara said quietly. He burned them in himself, Cole said. I noticed it that night. I thought it was the kind of detail that meant something about a man that he marked his own things. Not because he was possessive, because he believed in things being what they said they were. Mara reached out and touched the cover with 2 fingers lightly. Then she drew her hand back. Open it, she said. The pages were dense with Daniel Marsh's handwriting. Small, precise, the handwriting of someone who'd been trained to fit a lot of information into limited space. Dates ran down the left margins. Names were written in full, no abbreviations, no codes. Amounts followed names. There were cross-references between entries, arrows connecting incidents across different pages. The whole thing structured less like a journal and more like a legal brief built by someone who'd understood that the details were the only thing that would ever matter. Cole turned to the last pages. He found the name, Walter Pena, written twice on 2 separate pages connected by a hand-drawn line. The first entry was a payment, a specific amount, a specific date. The second entry was an instruction written in Daniel's hand, as if transcribing something he had been told. Pena handles the final step. Pena decides when. Cole set the notebook down. It's in there, he said. Mara was looking at her mother's journal, which she'd opened alongside the notebook cross-referencing. My mother's entry from 2 days before the motel, she said. She wrote down everything my father told her in that phone call. The name Pena appears, the word lawyer. The phrase, if anything happens, Pena ordered it. She looked up. She was documenting what my father told her before it happened. The weight of that settled across the table between them. Cole's phone rang. He looked at it, Reaper. He answered it. Where are you? Reaper said. No greeting. Home, Cole said. Marcus called me this morning. Said you seemed, a pause. Said you seemed different last night after you left. Another pause, and this one felt calculated. I need you to come in, Cole, this afternoon. We need to talk about what you said last night. Cole looked at Mara across the table. She was watching him, reading his face with her father's eyes. What specifically do you want to talk about? Cole said. The name you said, Reaper said. Pena. Cole, if that name gets around, if word gets out that someone from this club is making accusations against a connected attorney. It's not an accusation, Cole said. It's a fact. It's a story, Reaper said, and his voice was flat. It's your story, and right now it's starting to sound like a liability. Cole felt the familiar hardness settle into his chest, the same hardness that had kept him returning to that clubhouse for 20 years, while people laughed, the same hardness that had kept him sealing and protecting and waiting when walking away would have been easier. I'll come in, Cole said, but I won't be alone. A pause on Reaper's end. What does that mean? It means I found something, Cole said, and you're going to want to see it. He ended the call. Mara was still watching him. Was that your club? She asked. My vice president, Cole said. He's been trying to manage me out of relevance for 6 years. He thinks I'm an embarrassment. Are you going to tell him about me? I'm going to show him you, Cole said. There's a difference. He looked at her steadily. Are you willing to go to the clubhouse with me today? She didn't hesitate. That's why I drove through the night to get here, she said. Reaper called twice more on the drive over. Cole didn't answer either time. He'd said what needed to be said. The rest would happen in person, where the look on a man's face when the truth walks through his door tells you more than any phone conversation ever could. Mara rode in her own car following him. She'd been to places like this before she'd told him she'd spent years tracking her father's history through channels that were not always comfortable or safe. And she'd learned that walking into unfamiliar rooms was something you did or didn't do based on whether the information on the other side was worth it. The information on the other side, she'd said, was worth it. Cole pulled into the lot at 20 after 2. Reaper's truck was already there along with 4 other vehicles Cole recognized. More bodies than a standard Tuesday afternoon. Reaper had made calls. Cole registered this without changing his pace. He walked in and held the door for Mara, and the room did what rooms do when something unexpected enters them. It paused, recalibrated, reassembled itself around the new information. There were 9 men in the bar, Reaper at the center of the room standing, which meant he'd positioned himself to control the space before Cole arrived. Drew at the bar trying to look casual and not succeeding. Marcus at the card table not playing cards, just sitting with his arms folded and his face unreadable. 4 others Cole knew well, and one near the back, a man Cole didn't recognize who was watching with the particular alertness of someone there specifically to watch. Reaper's eyes went to Mara. "Who is this?" he said. "Her name is Mara Marsh," Cole said. Her father was Daniel Marsh, the man I told you about for 20 years. The room processed this differently than Cole had expected. He'd expected more resistance, the familiar armor of skepticism that these men wore like a second jacket. Instead, what moved through the room was something quieter and more unsettling. Not disbelief, something closer to the feeling before a storm, when the air pressure changes and your body knows something before your brain does. Drew had gone completely still at the bar. Marcus unfolded his arms slowly. Only Reaper kept his face exactly where he'd placed it, controlled patient waiting. "I see," he said. He looked at Mara. "And you have verified who you are to Cole. How exactly?" "I have my mother's journal," Mara said. Her voice was steady. "I have a photograph of my father that matches the description Cole has given of the man he met. I have dated entries correlating exactly with the events Cole has described for 20 years. She paused. "And I have pages in my mother's handwriting that name a man called Walter Pena in connection with my father's shooting dated before the shooting took place." Reaper looked at Cole. "The notebook," he said. Cole reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and placed the sealed oilcloth on the nearest table. The room changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the particular change that happens when an object that has only existed as a detail in a story suddenly becomes physical, suddenly has weight and dimension, and a worn leather cover with burned initials, and the men who have laughed at that story are now standing in a room with the reality of it sitting in front of them. Drew said, very quietly, "That's actually real." It wasn't a question. "It's always been real," Cole said. Reaper took 2 steps forward. He was looking at the oilcloth with an expression that Cole couldn't entirely read, something working behind it that Cole hadn't seen from him before. Not quite fear, not quite calculation. Something between the two. "I want to see it," Reaper said. "No," Cole said. Reaper looked up sharply. "This doesn't get handled inside these walls," Cole said. "Not anymore. I came here today because you called me, and because these are my brothers, and because after 20 years of telling this story in this room, I figure I owe the room the truth when it finally shows up." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "But the notebook goes to the right people. Federal people. People who can actually do something with it. That was Daniel Marsh's intention. That was what he bled in a desert parking lot to make possible. And I am not going to let 40 years of waiting end with it sitting on a bar table while 9 men argue about it." The silence lasted long enough to become a position. Reaper said, "You don't know who you're dealing with. If Pena's name is in that book and you take it to federal authorities, you're making a move against a man who has survived 3 federal investigations, a man with resources and reach. You think he doesn't have people watching. You think word doesn't travel. I think," Cole said, "that he's had 40 years of believing this moment would never come. And I think that when it does, he won't be as prepared as he thinks." Mara spoke. "I was followed," she said. The room shifted again. "Before I called you," she told Cole. "When I was still in Oregon, after I found your name in my mother's letter, I noticed a car twice different locations, same plate. I changed hotels. The next morning, the car was outside the new hotel." She paused. "I drove down the coast before cutting inland. I don't know if I lost them. I don't know how they knew to look for me." Cole looked at her. "How long between when your mother died and when you started moving?" he asked. 3 weeks, she said. "I had things to settle, estate paperwork." 3 weeks is enough time, Cole said. "Enough time for what?" Drew asked. "Enough time for someone to be watching the estate process," Cole said. "Watching for exactly this, a daughter with access to her mother's belongings. A daughter who might find something." He looked at Reaper. "Someone knew Daniel Marsh's wife existed. Someone has been keeping track." Reaper's expression shifted. finally genuinely shifted the controlled patience cracking along a line that Cole hadn't known was there. Pina, Reaper said. Or someone working for him, Cole said. How close behind you are they? Marcus asked Mara. I don't know, she said. I didn't see anyone on the road from the interstate, but I wasn't certain I was clear. Marcus stood up. He looked at Cole. He looked at the oilcloth on the table. Then he looked at the man near the back of the room, the one Cole hadn't recognized, and Cole watched something pass between Marcus and that stranger, a look too quick and too specific to be casual. Marcus, Cole said. Marcus looked at him. Who is that? Cole said, nodding toward the back. Marcus was quiet for exactly 1 beat too long. He's with me, he said. That's not an answer, Cole said. He's a contact, Marcus said. Someone I've been talking to. About your story, Cole. For the past 3 months. He exhaled. I've been trying to verify what you've been telling us. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure I'd find anything. I didn't want to give you hope and then come back with nothing. Cole stared at him. You've been investigating, Cole said. I've been trying to, Marcus said. And the man in the back, his name is Frank Dellinger. He's a retired prosecutor out of Phoenix. I found him through a contact in the court system. He paused. He knows the case, Cole. The federal case your man Daniel was tied to. He was a junior prosecutor on it in 1986. He left the office in '89. He's been... Marcus stopped. Frank, come up here. The man walked forward. He was 65, maybe 67, with a gray suit and the unhurried movement of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms and understood that the room always feels what you feel before you say it. He stopped a few feet from Cole and looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at the oilcloth. That's the Marsh notebook, he said. Not a question. Cole looked at Marcus. I described it to him, Marcus said, from what you told us. That notebook, Frank Dellinger said quietly, was listed as evidence in a federal case that was never fully prosecuted. The case collapsed in 1987 when the primary witness died in custody ruled accidental. 3 attorneys were investigated in connection with possible jury tampering. One of them was Walter Pina. He looked at Cole directly. I never believed it was accidental, but I was 28 years old and I had no evidence and no standing and a lot of pressure to let it go. A pause. I let it go. The room was completely silent. I've regretted it, he said, every year since. Cole looked at the oilcloth on the table. He looked at Mara. He looked at Frank Dellinger, this man he hadn't known existed this morning, standing in his club on a Tuesday afternoon like the universe had decided it was finally done, making Cole wait. He picked up the oilcloth. Then let's not waste any more time, he said. Reaper's voice came from across the room. Cole? Cole looked at him. Reaper's face had done something Cole had never seen it do in 12 years. It had let go of everything it usually held in place. The amusement, the control, the patient practice management of every room he entered, all of it gone, replaced by something raw and simple. I'm sorry, Reaper said, for the laughing, for... He stopped, started again. I should have listened. Cole looked at him for a long moment. Yeah, he said, you should have. He didn't say it with anger, just with the truth of it, the plain and unvarnished truth, the way you say things that have waited long enough for softening and are done waiting. He tucked the oilcloth back inside his jacket. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered it without thinking. Heavy breathing on the line. Then a voicemail controlled expensive, with the particular expensiveness of a man who has never in his adult life been uncertain of his own authority. Mr. Mercer, the voice said, I think it's time we spoke directly. Don't you... Cole's hand tightened on the phone. Walter Pina, he said. The room stopped breathing. Very good, Pina said. I understand you've had an interesting morning. I understand a young woman drove a long way to find you. I'm going to need you to listen very carefully to what I say next, because I'm going to say it once, and the choice you make in the next 60 seconds is going to determine how the rest of this goes for everyone in that room. Cole looked around at the faces watching him. Mara Marcus, Frank Dellinger, Reaper, Drew, all of them, and he felt something settle into him. Not calm exactly, something harder than calm. Something that had been building for 40 years and had just found the shape it had always been moving toward. Go ahead, Cole said. Talk. Walter Pina let the silence breathe for exactly 3 seconds before he continued. That 3 seconds told Cole everything he needed to know about the man. It was the pause of someone who had spent decades in rooms where the person who controlled the silence controlled the outcome. A lawyer's pause. A man who understood that what you don't say immediately is sometimes more powerful than anything you do say. Here is what I know, Pina said. I know a woman named Mara Marsh drove from Medford, Oregon to Tucson, Arizona in the last 18 hours. I know she is currently in a room with you and several members of your motorcycle club. I know she brought documents from her mother's estate. Another pause. And I know you have something that has been missing for a very long time. Cole kept his voice flat. You've been watching her since her mother died. I've been aware of certain situations, Pina said carefully. Lawyer's language, every word load-bearing. Nothing wasted, nothing that could be used against him later. What I'm calling to tell you, Mr. Mercer, is that whatever you think you have, whatever that notebook contains, it will not do what you think it will do. The case it relates to is 40 years old. Evidence degrades, memories are unreliable, and men who were young prosecutors in 1986 are old men now, with no standing and no institutional support. A slight shift in his tone, something that could have been interpreted as reasonable if you didn't know what was behind it. This can end quietly. Nothing has to happen to anyone. The woman goes home. You keep your notebook as a souvenir of an interesting night in 1985, and everyone continues their lives. Cole looked at Mara. She was watching him with those steady eyes, reading everything she could off his face, and he understood that she'd been in rooms like this before, rooms where powerful men offered quiet endings to things that deserved loud ones. What happens if I say no, Cole said. Then things become complicated, Pina said. For you, for the woman, for your club, which I understand has had enough complications in recent years without acquiring new ones. A pause. I'm not threatening you, Mr. Mercer. I'm describing reality. There's a difference. That's a lawyer talking, Cole said. Let me respond like a biker. He kept his voice completely even. I've been waiting 40 years for this conversation. I've kept that notebook sealed through 3 moves, 2 break-ins, I'm fairly sure weren't random, and more Tuesday nights of being laughed at than I can count. I am 71 years old, Walter. I have nothing left to be afraid of losing. And the woman you've been following drove through the night to find me because her dying mother told her to, which means she's got even less to lose than I do. Cole paused. So no, we're not ending this quietly. The line was silent for 4 seconds. You should think about this more carefully, Pina said. I've thought about it for 40 years, Cole said. We're done thinking. He ended the call, the room and exhaled. Drew said, he called you. He called me, Cole said. He knows exactly where we are, Marcus said. He's known for a while, Mara said. She wasn't panicking. Cole noted this, the same quality her father had shown in that parking lot. The ability to receive bad information without letting it scramble your thinking. He had people on me in Oregon. He's had time to track me here. He knows who you are, Cole. He's always known because my father told my mother your name, and my mother's name was in a system somewhere, and a man like Pina has access to systems. Frank Dellinger spoke from near the back of the room. He'd been listening to the whole call from 5 feet away, and his face had the particular concentration of a former prosecutor running calculations he hadn't had to run in decades. He's right about one thing, he said. The age of the case is a problem. 40 years of elapsed time. The original prosecutors are retired or dead. The institutional memory of that investigation is almost non-existent. He looked at Cole. But he's wrong about the notebook. Physical documentation from the period of the crime, in the hand of the witness himself with dates and names and specific payment amounts, that's not degraded evidence. That's primary source material. If it's authenticated, and I believe it can be, it changes everything. Can you reopen a case, that old Reaper asked? He'd moved closer to the group without Cole noticing. Another thing Cole registered, that Reaper had crossed the floor from where he'd been standing and was now standing with them rather than across from them. I can't reopen anything, Dellinger said. I'm retired. I have no authority. But I know who does. I know a federal investigator, active current someone, who has been building a file on Pina's more recent activities for the last 2 years. The older case is exactly the kind of foundational evidence that links Pina's pattern of behavior across decades. He looked at Mara. Your mother's journal, the dated entries, the corroborating details combined with the notebook, that's not nothing. That's the kind of documentation that makes a 2-year investigation suddenly have a spine. Can you reach your contact today? Cole asked. I can try, Dellinger said. But Cole, you need to understand something. Once I make that call, this moves fast. Federal involvement means things happen on their timeline, not ours. And Pina will know the moment any inquiry touches his name in a federal database. He has visibility into those systems. That's how he's survived 3 investigations. How much time do we have before he moves? Marcus asked. He already moved, Cole said. He called me. That means he's done watching. He's done being patient. Cole looked around the room. We need to make the call now, before he decides that a quiet ending requires something other than a phone conversation. Dellinger already had his phone out. He stepped toward the back of the room and made the call, and Cole watched his face while he talked, watched the moment the other person picked up, watched Dellinger's posture change from careful to urgent, watched him turn slightly away from the room with the instinct of someone who didn't want 9 people hearing everything. Cole turned to Mara. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine, she said. You don't have to be fine, he said. It's allowed to be a lot. She looked at him with something that might have been gratitude and might have been the very specific thing that happens when someone gives you permission to feel the weight of what you're carrying. My mother spent 40 years being afraid, she said. I'm not going to spend another 40 being afraid. Whatever happens today, I want it to happen. I want it done. She paused. My father died for what's in that notebook. My mother spent her whole life in the shadow of what happened to him. I'm not going to walk away from this because someone on a phone told me it would be complicated. Your father would have liked you, Cole said. She looked away for a moment. I hope so, she said quietly. I never got the chance to find out. Dellinger came back across the room. She'll meet us, he said. Special Agent Karen Race. She's in Phoenix. She can be here in 2 hours. He paused, but she has one condition. She needs to see the notebook before she commits to anything official. She needs to assess it personally. That's reasonable, Cole said. There's a problem, Dellinger said. He looked at Cole steadily. She said Pina's name flagged in their system 40 minutes ago. Someone ran a search on him through a federal database. That search was not initiated by anyone in her department. The room went cold. He's running his own check, Marcus said. He's trying to find out what we have before we can use it. He's trying to find out how much time he has, Cole said. 2 hours, Reaper said. That's how long until your federal agent gets here. 2 hours for Pina to decide what his next move is. He looked at Cole with an expression that had none of the old amusement left in it. What do you want to do with those 2 hours? Cole felt the familiar hardness settle deeper. He looked at the oilcloth inside his jacket, felt the weight of it, 40 years of weight, the weight of a promise made to a dying man in a desert parking lot, and he thought about all the ways this could go wrong and all the ways it had already been going wrong for 4 decades, and he made the decision the same way he'd made the decision in that parking lot in 1985, which was not with calculation but with the bone-deep certainty that there was only one right answer. We stay here, Cole said. We keep the notebook close. We wait for Race. He looked at Reaper. Can you put bodies on the door? Reaper didn't hesitate. He turned to Drew. Call Hatch and Morales. Tell them I need them here in the next 30 minutes, no questions. He looked at the man near the back, the stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore. Dellinger, you stay close to Cole. I wasn't planning to leave, Dellinger said. Drew was already on his phone. Marcus moved to the window without being asked, positioning himself with the practiced economy of someone who'd spent years understanding what it meant to watch a door. And Cole stood in the middle of the room and breathed and let the thing that had been building in him for 40 years settle into something that felt for the first time like solid ground. The first hour passed in the particular stretched way that hours pass when you are waiting for something you know is coming and don't know the shape of. People moved. People talked in low voices. Drew brought coffee from the back, and nobody made a joke about anything, which was itself a kind of statement about how the room had changed. Mara sat beside Cole, and they talked not about the notebook, not about Pina, but about Daniel Marsh. She told him things her mother had written in the letter details about who her father had been before the witness program took him out of her life. He'd been an accountant originally, had worked for a firm in Phoenix that handled legal clients, had started noticing things that didn't add up. Payments routed through shell accounts, names that appeared and disappeared, money moving in directions that only made sense if someone had a reason to hide where it was going. He could have looked away, Mara said. My mother said he talked about the choice. He knew what it meant to go to the authorities. He knew it would end everything he'd built. He didn't look away, Cole said. He didn't look away, she said. And then they came for him, and you were there, and she stopped. And then there were 40 years. Cole nodded. He was a good man, Cole said. It was a simple thing to say, and he said it simply. I knew him for 6 hours, but I knew that about him in the first 10 minutes. Mara pressed her lips together, not crying, managing the edge of it the way you manage the edge of something large that you're not going to let tip over in a room full of people. My mother loved him for the rest of her life, she said. She never really stopped. Even when she was trying to build a new life, trying to protect me, trying to just exist in the world, she carried him with her every day. A pause. She said the guilt was the worst part, that she'd spent years thinking if she had done something different, said something different, maybe he would have. It wasn't her fault, Cole said. I know that, Mara said. She knew that too eventually. But knowing a thing and feeling a thing aren't the same distance from each other. Cole thought about all the years he'd carried his own version of that, the thing you know and the thing you feel. He'd known intellectually that he couldn't have done more than he did in that parking lot. He'd felt in the way that wouldn't reason away, like he'd failed a man who'd trusted him. No, he said, they're not. Dellinger came over and sat across from them. He had his reading glasses on and a legal pad that Cole hadn't seen him produce, and he'd been making notes. I've been thinking about the authentication process, he said, in the way of someone who needs to do something useful with their hands and their brain, or they'll start thinking about things they can't control. The notebook will need to be examined by a document expert, the ink, the paper, the aging of the materials. The handwriting will need to be compared against samples of Daniel Marsh's other documents, if any exist in the federal archives. My mother's letter, Mara said. She quoted directly from what my father told her, and she wrote down dates. If those dates align with the entries in the notebook, corroborating timeline, Dellinger said, nodding. Yes, that's significant. Not conclusive alone, but combined with the notebook itself. He stopped, looked toward the door. Marcus's voice came from the window. Car in the lot, he said. Dark SUV, Arizona plates. Nobody's gotten out. The room tightened. Reaper moved to Marcus's position. He looked out. He was quiet for a moment. One driver visible, he said. Windows are tinted. Could be one more in the back. Cole stood up. How long has it been there? He asked Marcus. Just pulled in, Marcus said. Slow entry. Didn't park in a regular space, pulled across the end of the row. Drew came through this back door with Hatchin and Morales, two men Cole had known for 15 years, solid and quiet, and the kind of reliable that only comes from having been tested. Hatch was a former Army man, broad and deliberate. Morales was smaller, but had the particular attention of someone who never missed the detail that mattered. Reaper briefed them in about 30 seconds, the kind of briefing that works, because everyone in the room already understands the basic grammar of the situation. A car outside, unknown occupants, a problem that might be arriving or might be waiting for something else to arrive first. Don't go out there, Cole said. Not yet. If they're watching the buildings, how? Hatch started. They want to know what we're doing, Cole said. Right now, what we're doing is waiting for a federal agent who lands in 2 hours. That's not information Pina wants to have confirmed. So we don't confirm anything. We let them watch an empty parking lot. And if they come in, Morales asked. Cole looked at him. Then they come in, he said. The SUV stayed where it was for 22 minutes. Cole knew because he watched the clock above the bar. The same clock that had counted every hour of every Tuesday night for 20 years, and he counted the minutes with a precision that surprised him, like his body had decided this was too important to let blur. Then Marcus said, "It's moving," and everyone exhaled, and the SUV pulled out of the lot and was gone. They were confirming location, Dellinger said. Not making a move, not yet. Penna's assembling information before he decides his next step, Reaper said. Or, Marcus said, and his voice was careful, he already decided his next step, and the SUV was the first part of it. Cole looked at the clock. 1 hour and 20 minutes until Agent Rice arrived. He looked at the oilcloth inside his jacket. 1 hour and 20 minutes for Walter Pena to decide whether a quiet solution was still possible or whether the kind of ending he preferred was a different kind entirely. Cole's phone rang again 40 minutes later. Unknown number, but this time a different area code. He answered it. Mr. Mercer, a woman's voice. Professional, direct, no warmth in it, but no hostility, either the voice of someone who had learned to hold both in reserve until she knew which one was needed. My name is Karen Rice. Frank Dellinger gave you my name. I'm about 90 minutes out. I need to ask you some questions before I arrive. Ask, Cole said. The notebook, has anyone else handled it? Has it been opened recently? I opened it this morning for the first time since 1987, Cole said, in the presence of Mara Marsh and no one else. Good, don't open it again till I get there. A pause. I need to tell you something and I need you to hear it fully before you react. Cole waited. Walter Pena filed a complaint with the Phoenix field office 45 minutes ago, Race said. He's alleging harassment. He's claiming that he's being targeted by a criminal organization, your club, in connection with an extortion scheme based on fabricated documents. The silence lasted a full breath. He moved first, Cole said. He moved first, Reyes confirmed. He's trying to get ahead of the narrative. If he can establish in the record that any contact with him originated from your club and that the documents you have and are fabricated, then anything you bring forward looks retaliatory. It poisons the well. Another pause. How confident are you in the authenticity of what you have? Completely, Cole said. I need more than that. Daniel Marsh burned his initials into the cover himself, Cole said. The handwriting matches my description of the man down to specific word choices I've repeated in this club for 20 years. Choices I made because they were exactly what he said, not approximations. And Mara Marsh has her mother's journal with entries dated before the shooting, corroborating every name in that notebook. His voice held steady. I've been telling this story for 40 years. I have never changed a single detail. Not one. You look at that notebook and you'll find every word I've said is in there. A pause on her end that felt different from Pena's pauses, not calculated, but the pause of someone updating their assessment. I'll be there in 90 minutes, she said. Don't open the notebook. Don't let anyone else handle it. And Mr. Mercer, if Pena filed a complaint, he's going to push for a law enforcement response to your location. It may come before I do. How much before? Cole asked. I don't know, she said. That's why I'm telling you now. She ended the call. Cole looked at the room. Local law enforcement may be coming, he said. Pena has filed a complaint framing us as the aggressors. He paused. We haven't done anything. We're going to continue not doing anything. Nobody goes outside. Nobody makes any statement to anyone that isn't me or Dellinger. Reaper looked at him. If local comes in here, then they find a room full of people sitting quietly waiting for a federal agent. Cole said, that's all. It's also what Pena wants, Dellinger said, and his voice had the careful precision of a man thinking out loud in real time. He wants a law enforcement interaction logged here. He wants the Optics Biker Club police presence extortion allegation. Even if nothing comes of it, it creates a record he can point to. He looked at Cole. He's not trying to stop you. He's trying to complicate the story enough that the truth gets muddy. He's been doing that for 40 years, Cole said. And it worked for 40 years, Dellinger said, because there was no notebook. Now there is. Mara had been quiet through all of this. Cole looked at her and found her watching him with an expression he couldn't immediately categorize. Not fear, not calculation, something older and more personal than either. What? He said. I was just thinking, she said slowly, that my father trusted the right person. In that parking lot, he trusted the right person, and it made a difference. She paused. He couldn't have known that. He was bleeding out in the gravel. He just made a decision about who was in front of him. She looked at Cole directly. How did he know? Cole thought about it. He didn't, Cole said. He just needed someone, and I was there, and he made a call. That's all any of us can do. She nodded slowly. Then Drew from the window said two words very quietly. They're back. Not one SUV this time. 3 vehicles. The dark SUV from earlier and 2 others, a black sedan, and a second SUV, all 3 pulling into the lot with the measured, deliberate pace of people who are not concerned about being seen. And they weren't parking at the end of the row this time. They were pulling up to the front. Reaper was already moving, putting himself between the door and the rest of the room without being asked, the automatic positioning of a man who has spent his life understanding how spaces work when they become dangerous. Hatch and Morales flanked the door on either side. Cole stayed where he was in the center of the room, the oilcloth inside his jacket, Mara 2 feet to his left, Dellinger just behind. The door opened. Two men entered first. Not law enforcement, not in any formal capacity, no badges, no uniforms. Men in the civilian clothes of professionals who do not need uniforms because their authority comes from somewhere else. They held the door and Walter Pena walked through it. Cole had seen his face for 4 seconds under a parking lot light 40 years ago. He knew him immediately. Pena was in his early 70s now, silver-haired, the kind of trim that comes from deliberate maintenance, wearing a suit that was expensive in the understated way that signals old money rather than new. He walked into the room with the ease of a man who had walked into difficult rooms for 5 decades and had not yet encountered one he couldn't control. He looked around. He took in Reaper Hatch Morales Drew Marcus. He took in Dellinger. He took in Mara. Then he looked at Cole. And for the first time since he walked through that door, something moved across his face that wasn't composure. Because Cole was looking at him the way a man looks at something he has been looking for across 40 years of desert and doubt and Tuesday nights of laughter. Not with hatred, not with triumph, with recognition. "Walter Pena," Cole said, "you look older than I expected." Pena looked at him for a long moment. "You look exactly the same," he said, and the compliment, if that's what it was, carried something underneath it that was not a compliment at all. He stepped forward into the room. The two men who'd entered with him stayed near the door. Outside, the other vehicles had not disgorged anyone yet. "I told you on the phone that this could end quietly," Pena said. His voice filled the bar the same way it had filled the phone-controlled spacious, the voice of a man who charged $400 an hour to use it and considered that a bargain. "I came here personally to make that offer again, because I believe in giving people the opportunity to make good decisions before decisions get made for them." "That's generous," Cole said. "I'm a generous man," Pena said without irony. "The woman with the file," Cole said, nodding at Mara. "The man who spent 40 years keeping the notebook safe. The retired prosecutor who never stopped believing the case should have been made." He kept his eyes on Pena. "And you walked in here personally with 3 vehicles and hired muscle to offer us all a quiet ending." Cole tilted his head. "You're scared." Pena's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind it, the slightest realignment of whatever he kept locked behind that face. "I'm cautious," he said. "There's a difference." "You're scared," Cole said again, "because for 40 years the only thing that stood between you and that notebook was time and disbelief. Time has run out and somebody finally believes." He paused. "That somebody is now 60 minutes away." Pena looked at Dellinger. "Frank," he said, "you should have stayed retired." "Probably," Dellinger said. "I've been making that decision wrong for 30 years. I'm going to try getting it right." Pena turned back to Cole. The composure was still in place, but it required something now you could see it requiring something where before it had been effortless. "Here is what will happen if you pursue this," he said. "The notebook will be challenged. The authentication process takes months. My attorneys will file motions that delay every step. The woman's mother's journal is secondhand testimony from a deceased person with a documented history of psychological instability. Yes, I know Caroline Marsh's history. I've known it for 30 years. I've kept it documented specifically for this reason. Every delay, every challenge, every complication, I have prepared for all of it." He paused. "You are 71 years old, Evelyn. Do you want to spend the remaining years of your life in a legal process that I will ensure is as long and difficult as I can possibly make it?" The room was absolutely silent. Cole looked at him. He thought about Daniel Marsh's hands in the dark gripping his wrist. He thought about 40 years. He thought about Mara sitting 2 feet to his left, who had driven through the night because her dying mother told her to find the man who'd kept his promise. "Yes," Cole said. "I do." Something in Pena's face finally fully broke. Not much, not dramatically, just the slight collapse of the thing a man holds in place when he realizes that the tools he's been relying on don't work anymore. He looked at his 2 men by the door. He looked back at Cole. And in the moment before he made the decision that would determine everything that followed, Cole's phone rang. He looked at it. Karen Rice. "I'm 20 minutes out," she said when he answered. "I called ahead. There will be federal presence at your location in 15. Don't let anyone leave." Cole lowered the phone. He looked at Walter Pena. 15 minutes, Cole said. Pina stood very still, then he took one step back toward the door. Reaper moved. Not fast, not dramatically. He simply positioned himself so that the door was no longer directly available, his body in the space between Pina's exit and the exit itself, and he looked at Pina with the steady, unhurried look of a man who has decided something and doesn't need to announce it. "You should sit down," Reaper said. Pina looked at him. He looked at Cole. He looked at Mara Marsh, who was looking back at him with her father's eyes, with that same absolute stillness, the stillness of someone who has decided that whatever comes next, they are not moving. He sat down, and outside in the parking lot, the three vehicles waited in the late afternoon sun, while 60 years of unfinished business sat in a room together and counted the minutes until someone with the authority to end it finally arrived. The 14 minutes that followed were the longest 14 minutes Cole had experienced since the night in the desert. Pena sat at the table nearest the door, not because anyone had forced him there, but because when Reaper had positioned himself and Pena had made the calculation that leaving was no longer the cleanest option, he'd chosen the chair that kept the most distance between himself and the rest of the room. The two men he'd brought inside stayed near him, standing, saying nothing. Outside, the three vehicles hadn't moved. Nobody spoke for the first 2 minutes. Then Pena straightened in his chair and looked at Cole with the expression of a man who has decided that composure is still his best available tool even now, even here. "You know what the irony is," Pena said. Not a question. The opening of a performance, Cole recognized, reframed the attempt to establish a different narrative before the one already in motion could fully land. "I was never the primary. In 1985, I was retained counsel for people significantly more powerful than myself doing what attorneys do, which is protect the interests of their clients. By sending armed men to a motel," Cole said. "I sent no one anywhere," Pena said with the precise rehearsed steadiness of someone who had said that particular sentence many times over many years. "I was present that night in a professional capacity. What occurred in that parking lot was not something I ordered or anticipated." "You ran," Cole said. "I removed myself from a dangerous situation," Pena said, "which is what any reasonable person does." "The man bleeding in the gravel," Cole said. "Did he get to remove himself?" Pena's jaw tightened, the first visible crack in the performance. "Daniel Marsh made choices that put him in danger. I didn't make those choices for him." Mara's voice came from across the room, quiet and exact. "His name was my father." Pena looked at her. Something moved across his face, not guilt, not exactly, but the thing that exists in the space where guilt would be in a man who had cauterized that particular capacity long ago. An acknowledgement, involuntary brief gone before it fully formed. "Miss Marsh," he said. "Don't," she said, just that. One word delivered without heat, which made it land harder than anger would have. Pena looked away. Dellinger had been standing to Cole's right, and now he moved forward 2 steps with his legal pad and his reading glasses, in the particular bearing of a man who has just remembered exactly who he is and what he spent 30 years doing. "Mr. Pena," he said, "I want you to understand something clearly. Whatever narrative you have been constructing since you made that phone call to the Phoenix field office, the extortion allegation, the fabricated document framing that narrative is going to collide with physical evidence in approximately 10 minutes. And when it does, the record of the complaint you filed will become part of the case against you, because it establishes consciousness of guilt. It establishes that you knew what was in that notebook before federal authorities authenticated it, which means you had prior knowledge, which means you've been aware of your own exposure for 40 years and have been actively working to suppress it." Pena looked at him with the measured attention of one attorney listening to another. "You're retired, Frank," he said. "I am," Dellinger said. "Doesn't change a word of what I just said." One of Pena's men shifted his weight. Hatch noticed it and moved correspondingly, and for a moment the room had the particular charged geometry of spaces where physical conflict is present as a possibility, even when no one is moving toward it yet. Then the man settled and Hatch settled, and the moment passed without becoming anything. Cole watched Pena think. He'd been watching men think under pressure his entire life, and he understood the process, the rapid assessment of available options, the weighing of risks, the search for the angle that hasn't been closed yet. Pena was doing all of that, and Cole could see him doing it, and what Cole could also see, what gave him the first clean breath he'd taken since Pena walked through the door, was that Pena was not finding the angle. because for the first time in 40 years, there wasn't one. This time, Karen Rice arrived in 13 minutes, not 15. She came through the door first alone before the two federal vehicles behind her had fully stopped in the lot. She was 50, maybe 52, dark-haired, and compact dressed in the kind of practical professional clothes that said federal without announcing it. She took in the room in a single sweep, Pina, his men Reaper at the door position, Cole in the center, Mara Dellinger, and her face registered all of it without expression. She looked at Cole. "Mr. Mercer," she said. "Agent Race," Cole said. She looked at Pina. "Mr. Pointebarkin," she said. "I wasn't expecting to find you here." "I came to resolve a misunderstanding," Pina said. "I see," she said in the tone of someone who sees considerably more than the words being offered. She looked at his two men. "Are you armed?" A pause. "Yes," one of them said. "Then you're going to step outside," Race said. "And you're going to hand your weapons to the agents in the lot, and you're going to wait there." She paused. "That's not a request." They looked at Pina. He nodded once. They went outside. Race looked at the room, at Hatch Morales, Drew Marcus. "Everyone who isn't directly involved in this conversation," she said. "I need you to give us space. Not leave. Just give us space." Reaper looked at Cole. Cole nodded. Reaper moved the others to the far end of the bar without a word, which was the kind of leadership Cole had always respected, the kind that doesn't need to explain itself. Race sat down. She set a case on the table, open. It produced examination gloves and a small light. She looked at Cole. "The notebook," she said. Cole reached inside his jacket and placed the oilcloth on the table in front of her. Race looked at it for a moment before she touched it, the look of someone who has been told about an object so many times that seeing it in physical form requires a moment of adjustment. She pulled on the gloves. She unwrapped the oilcloth with careful, practiced movements. The notebook lay on the table. She examined the cover without opening it. She examined the initials. She took out her light and ran it along the edges, the binding, the places where the leather had aged and cracked and then stabilized over 4 decades. She turned it over. She looked at the back. Then she opened it. The room was completely silent. She read without speaking for 4 minutes. Turned pages with the same careful, methodical pace. Stopped at certain entries. Returned to others. Cross-referenced something on the early pages with something near the back. Put the light close to the handwriting. Cole watched her face. Dellinger watched her face. Mara watched her face. Pina watched the table. Race looked up. She looked at Dellinger first. "The payment entries on pages 6 through 11, she said. "The account numbers and routing information, I need you to look at something." Dellinger came forward. She pointed to a series of entries. He read them. His face went still in the particular way of someone who has just seen something connect to something else, the click of a recognition that happens before the brain has fully processed what the recognition means. "Those accounts," Dellinger said slowly, "the structure of those accounts match a pattern we've been documenting for the last 2 years, Race said, in Pina's current practice." She paused. He didn't stop. He modified, but the structure is the same. She looked at Pina. Pina said nothing. "Mr. Pena," Race said, "the complaint you filed with the Phoenix field office this afternoon, the extortion allegation, I've reviewed it. You claim the documents in possession of Mr. Mercer's associates are fabricated. You claim specific knowledge of their content." She paused. "How did you know what was in a notebook you claim not to have seen since 1985? The silence stretched. Pena's composure was still in place technically. The architecture of it was still standing, but it was the architecture of something that has lost its foundations still upright through structural habit, not through genuine support. "I want to speak with my attorney," he said. "You are an attorney," Race said. "A different attorney," he said. "You're welcome to call one," Race said. "You're not under arrest at this moment, but I want to be clear that this location and everything in it and everyone in it is now part of an active federal inquiry, which means that complaint you filed this afternoon becomes evidence in that inquiry. And the fact that you're currently sitting in this room, having driven here personally with armed personnel, following a woman you've had under surveillance since her mother's death." She let that sentence end without finishing it. She didn't need to finish it. "Call your attorney, Mr. Pena. That's good advice." Pena reached for his phone with steady hands. Cole watched the hands. They were steady, but they were working at being steady, and that was the difference. The next hour moved in the staccato rhythm of official process, Race's colleagues coming inside a forensic specialist, appearing with equipment. Cole hadn't expected and didn't fully understand Dellinger on the phone in the corner, was someone he called every 20 minutes with updates. Mara at the table with her mother's journal open alongside the notebook, while Race's team photographed and documented every page. Cole sat at the bar. He was not needed for any of the technical work that was happening, and he was old enough and self-aware enough to understand that the best thing he could do in this particular hour was stay out of the way and let the people with authority and equipment do what they were trained to do. It was an unusual position for him. He'd spent 40 years being the only person in the room who understood the full weight of what the notebook contained. Now there were 6 people who understood it, and they had resources he'd never had, and the thing he'd been protecting alone for 4 decades was no longer his alone to protect. It was a relief so large, it was almost its own kind of grief. Drew came and sat beside him. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "I owe you an apology," Drew said finally. Cole looked at his hands. "You were doing what made sense with what you had," Cole said. "A story with no evidence. A man who wouldn't show the notebook. 20 years of the same details." He paused. "I understand why it looked the way it looked." "I called you crazy," Drew said. "Nuktanom. Not to your face, but in this room, multiple times." "I know," Cole said, "and you kept coming back anyway." "I had to," Cole said. Drew was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you show anyone the notebook, even one person, even years ago?" Cole thought about how to answer that honestly. "Because once I showed it to someone," he said, "it became real in a different way. Real in a way I couldn't control. And the only people I knew how to trust, the only people whose judgment I believed in, were gone by the time I understood how to use what I had." He paused. "And because Daniel asked me to keep it safe, he didn't say show it to the right people. He said keep it safe. I kept it safe. To the point where nobody believed it existed," Drew said. "Yeah," Cole said. "That was the cost." Drew nodded slowly. "For what it's worth," he said. "I believe it now." Cole almost smiled. "It's worth something," he said. "Oh." Reaper appeared on Cole's other side, settling onto a stool with the unhurried movement of a man who's been standing for 2 hours and is finally allowing himself to sit. They were quiet together for a moment, the 3 of them at the bar, the activity of the investigation filling the room around them. Pina in the corner with a phone pressed to his ear, Mara at the table with Race. "I made a mistake with you," Reaper said. Cole looked at him. "I don't mean the laughing," Reaper said. "Though that too, I mean..." He stopped, rearranged. "I decided you were a liability before I knew enough to make that decision. I started managing you like a problem instead of listening to you like a brother. And that was wrong." He looked directly at Cole. "That was wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and I kept doing it because it was easier than the alternative." Cole studied him. Reaper wasn't a man who apologized, not as a pattern, not as a habit. Cole had known him for 12 years and could count on one hand the times he'd seen Reaper concede anything in any room. This was real. "What was the alternative?" Cole asked. "Believing you," Reaper said, "which meant believing the problem was real, which meant doing something about it, which was harder than just," he exhaled, "making you the joke." Cole was quiet for a moment. "You're a good VP," Cole said. "You run this chapter well. You protect these men." He paused. "But you've been protecting the wrong things from me." "I know," Reaper said. "Don't do it again." "I won't," Reaper said. That was it. No ceremony, no extended resolution. The thing had been said and received, and it was done because that was how men like them handled things briefly and finally and without returning to it. Cole picked up his coffee. Then Race's voice came across the room. "Mr. Mercer?" He got up. She was standing at the table, the notebook in its oilcloth, her forensic specialist to her left, Dellinger to her right, Mara directly across. She had the particular bearing of someone who has finished assessing and is now prepared to speak clearly. "The handwriting analysis will take time," she said. "Full authentication document aging tests, that's a process. But I can tell you right now, looking at what's in this notebook alongside the file I've been building for 2 years, that the payment structures, the account routing, patterns, the names in the margins, they are consistent with everything we have on Pina's current network." She paused. "He didn't stop operating in 1985. He restructured. The same people, the same methods updated and modernized. This notebook is the foundational record of a network that has been running for 40 years. Cole absorbed this. So it's bigger than Pina, he said. Significantly, Race said, Pina is the name you know. There are 6 other names in this book who are still active, still connected, still operating in positions of significant influence. She looked at him steadily. What you've been protecting, Mr. Mercer, is not a record of one crime from 1985. It's the origin document of a criminal network that is still functional today. The weight of that landed on Cole in a way he hadn't anticipated. He'd known the names were important. He'd known Daniel Marsh had died to protect this information. He hadn't fully understood, had never been in a position to fully understand the scale of what he'd been carrying. Daniel Marsh knew all of this, Cole said. He was an accountant who had access to the full financial architecture, Race said. He understood exactly what he had and exactly what it meant. And he documented it with a precision that... She paused. That is genuinely remarkable. He knew he might not survive. He made sure that if the notebook was ever found by the right person, it would be enough. Mara made a sound that was not quite a word. Cole looked at her and found her looking at the notebook with an expression that was grief and pride in equal painful measure, the face of someone absorbing a version of their father they hadn't known existed, and understanding for the first time the full cost of who he'd been. He was trying to protect people, she said. He was, Reyes said, and he died for it. He died for it, Reyes said, and what he left behind is going to finish what he started. Pina had ended his phone call. Cole looked across the room at him. Pena was watching the table, watching the notebook, watching Reyes, watching the forensic specialist making notes. His face had arrived at a kind of stillness that was different from the controlled composure he'd walked in with. This was the stillness of a man who has run out of moves and is now simply waiting to find out how the loss will be defined. Cole walked across the room and stood in front of him. Pina looked up. I want to ask you something, Cole said, and I want you to answer me honestly, not for the record, not legally, just, he paused, man to man. Pina looked at him for a long moment. Ask, he said. Daniel Marsh, Cole said. Did he suffer? Pina's jaw moved, a small movement tightly controlled. He survived the night, Pina said. Whatever happened after in custody, I don't have personal knowledge of. That's not an answer, Cole said. No, Pina said. It's not. He looked at his hands. He was a problem that needed to be resolved. That's how it was framed to me. That's how I framed it to myself. A pause. I've spent a long time not thinking about it in any other terms. But he was a person, Cole said. Pina didn't answer. He had a daughter, Cole said. She's 20 feet away from you right now. She drove through the night to finish what her father started. She's been carrying this her whole life. He paused. You didn't just take a witness. You took a father from a little girl and you let her spend 40 years not knowing why. Pina's hands on the table tightened. He didn't speak. Cole looked at him for another moment. Then he walked away. He didn't need anything from Pina. He'd asked the question because it needed to be asked, because Daniel Marsh deserved to be named out loud in front of the man responsible as a person and not a problem. That was enough. Whatever Pina held inside himself after this was Pina's to carry. Cole had been carrying enough for one lifetime. The hour that followed was federal process, in the particular controlled chaos of an investigation finding its footing. Race on her phone repeatedly, her colleagues moving with the quiet efficiency of people who understood what they had and were working to secure it, Dellinger providing legal context from memory with an accuracy that surprised even him. Documentation being photographed and cataloged with the care that 40 years of waiting demanded. Pina did not attempt to leave. His attorney arrived, a different attorney, a younger man who came through the door with a briefcase and the bright-eyed alarm of someone who'd been given an overview of the situation in a phone call and hadn't fully believed it. He and Pina spoke in the corner in low voices for 12 minutes. Then the attorney approached Race and they spoke in the tone of professionals negotiating the terrain of something significant. Cole watched all of it from the bar with Marcus beside him. What happens now? Marcus asked. Practically, what does this look like going forward? I don't know all of it, Cole said. Race will make determinations about what charges can be supported. The notebook goes into evidence. Mara's mother's journal goes into evidence. The forensic work on the handwriting and the document age will take weeks, maybe months. He paused. But Pina's network, the active part, the part that's still running, that's Reese's primary target. The 1985 case is the foundation. What she's been building for 2 years is the structure. He's going to lawyer up and fight everything, Marcus said. He is, Cole said. It's going to be long and expensive and complicated. He promised me that on the phone and I believe him. He looked at Marcus steadily. It doesn't matter. The notebook is authenticated. The record exists. Whatever he throws at the process, the truth is in the process now. You can delay the truth. You can complicate it. But once it's in the official record, with evidence, with corroboration, with a retired prosecutor and a federal agent and a forensic specialist all attached to it, he paused. You can't make it disappear. Marcus was quiet for a moment. 40 years, he said. 40 years, Cole said. Was it worth it? The waiting. Cole thought about the question with the seriousness it deserved. Ask me in a year, he said, when I know how it ends. He paused. But right now, tonight, sitting here knowing that notebook is in the right hands, that Mara found me, that Daniel Marsh's name is going to be spoken in a federal proceeding instead of buried in a parking lot record, nobody ever looked at again. He paused. Yeah, it was worth it. Race came back to him, then away from Pina's corner, with the careful directness of someone who had something specific to say. I need to tell you something, she said, and it's going to be hard to hear. Cole steadied himself. Daniel Marsh didn't die in protective custody, she said. He died 3 years after the motel incident in a hospital in New Mexico under a different name. The cause of death was recorded as natural complications from an untreated injury. She paused. The injury was consistent with a gunshot wound that had never been properly treated. Cole closed his eyes for 1 second. The wound from that night, he said. The wound from that night, she confirmed. He survived because you kept him alive until the paramedics arrived. But the damage was significant, and in protective custody, the medical care he received. She stopped. It wasn't adequate, and by the time the full extent of the damage was understood, it was too late. Cole said nothing. He had 3 more years, Ray said. 3 years in which he continued to cooperate with investigators, continued to provide information, continued to document everything he could remember. She paused. He never stopped. Cole looked across the room at Mara, who was still at the table, who didn't know yet what Race had just told him, who was looking at the notebook with the face of someone who has just found their father's handwriting for the first time. She needs to know, Cole said. Yes, Race said. I'll tell her. But I wanted you to know first. She looked at him steadily. Because he told the investigators about the night at the motel. He told them about you. He gave them your name and your description, and he said, she paused. He said that the man who stayed with him was the reason he had 3 more years. He said he wanted that on the record. Cole's jaw was tight. He breathed through it. Did he ever find out if Mara was safe, he asked. He knew Caroline and Mara were in the program, Ray said. He knew they were alive. He didn't know where. He wasn't permitted to know where. A pause. But he knew they were alive. Cole nodded. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way a person looks at a ceiling when they are handling something too large to look at directly. Then he looked at Mara. She had glanced up from the table and was looking back at him with the question already forming on her face, the reading of his expression, the same perceptiveness her father had shown in a desert parking lot when he'd looked at a stranger and decided to trust him. Cole walked across the room. He sat down across from her. He told her. He told her all of it, the 3 years, the hospital in New Mexico, the untreated wound, the continued cooperation, the statement her father had made to investigators with Cole's name in it. He watched her face move through everything it needed to move through. She didn't cry. She held it with both hands the way she'd held the coffee cup that morning, like something she was warming herself against. 3 more years, she said finally. 3 more years, Cole said. He kept working, she said. Even after everything, he kept documenting. He was that kind of man, Cole said. She looked at him. You kept your promise, she said. You found me. You found me, Cole said. We found each other, she said. And outside in the late Arizona afternoon, Walter Pina sat across the room from a federal agent and a retired prosecutor and the accumulated weight of 40 years of truth that had just become too heavy for anyone to keep buried. And in the parking lot, the 3 vehicles that had arrived with him sat empty, now their occupants having submitted to the federal presence with the particular deflation of people who had come prepared for a negotiation and found instead an ending. And Cole sat across from Mara Marsh and felt for the first time in 40 years the specific quiet of a promise kept. Not triumphant, not loud, just the settling of something that has been held at tension for so long that releasing it changes the shape of everything around it. He thought about Daniel Marsh's hands in the dark. He thought about a tire iron in a parking lot and a night that had never fully ended until now. He thought about a little girl named Mara that a dying man had asked him to find. He had found her. She had found him. And the notebook that had waited 40 years in an oilcloth in a fireproof box was now in the hands of people who could do with it exactly what Daniel Marsh had built it to do. Cole picked up his coffee cup. It was cold. He didn't care. He drank it anyway, and the room moved around him. And somewhere in the machinery of federal process that was now in motion, the name Walter Pena was being attached to consequences that had been waiting for 4 decades. And Daniel Marsh, accountant fatherman, who had looked a stranger in the eyes in a desert parking lot and decided to trust him, was finally, after everything, going to get the ending his courage had earned. Pena left the clubhouse in federal custody at 7:14 that evening. Not arrested, not formally, not yet. That distinction mattered legally, Race had explained, because the authentication process needed to complete before charges could be structured in a way that would survive the legal assault Pena's team would mount the moment papers were filed. But he left with 2 federal agents beside him and his own attorney 3 steps behind, and the particular quality of a man's walk changes when he knows that the room he's leaving is the last room he'll ever leave on his own terms. Cole watched him go. He didn't feel what he'd expected to feel. He'd spent 40 years constructing in the back rooms of his mind a version of this moment, the moment Walter Pena was finally accountable, finally in the machinery of justice, finally unable to walk away. He'd imagined it would feel like something dramatic, like a door slamming, like a verdict read aloud. It felt quieter than that. It felt like setting down something very heavy after carrying it so long that your hands had forgotten what it felt like to be empty. Race came back inside after seeing the vehicles out of the lot. She moved with the focused efficiency of someone who had a long night ahead of her and was already mentally inside it. She looked at Cole. The forensic team will have preliminary handwriting results within 72 hours, she said. Full document authentication, the aging test, the ink composition analysis that takes longer, 4 to 6 weeks. In the charges, Dellinger asked. He'd put his legal pad away, but his mind was still running. Cole could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself when he was working something through. The 1985 incident will be part of the filing, Race said. But the primary charges are going to center on the current network activity. That's where the prosecutable timeline is cleanest, and it's where we have 2 years of independent documentation to support what the notebook establishes as the origin pattern. She paused. The notebook makes the current case airtight. It shows continuity of criminal enterprise across 40 years. That's not a minor charge enhancement that changes the entire character of the prosecution. What does that mean for the people named in the notebook who aren't Pena Mabuayam? Cole asked. It means they're about to have a very difficult few weeks, Race said. 6 names currently active, currently connected. Some of them are going to cooperate when they understand what we have. Some of them won't. She looked at Cole steadily. This doesn't end with Pena. What you carried for 40 years, what Daniel Marsh documented, it's the thread that unravels the whole thing. Cole absorbed this. He looked at Mara. She was sitting with the stillness of someone who has received a large amount of information in a short period of time and is letting it settle into its proper weight and shape. She'd been that way since Cole had told her about her father's 3 additional years, not broken, not overwhelmed, but quietly rearranging herself around the new dimensions of what she now knew. What happens to the notebook, she asked Race. Legally, procedurally, does it stay in federal custody? It becomes evidence, Race said. It will be in federal custody through the duration of the prosecution, which given the scope could be 2 to 3 years. After the conclusion of all proceedings, personal property associated with a witness or victim can be returned to the next of kin. She paused. Which means it would come back to you. Mara looked at the notebook and its oilcloth on the table. My father's handwriting, she said. For 2 to 3 years, I won't be able to... She stopped. You can have it photographed, Race said. Every page, high resolution, before we take it into custody tonight. You all have a complete copy. Mara nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay, do that. Race moved to arrange it, and Cole sat down beside Mara while the photography was being set up, and neither of them spoke for a moment. How are you doing? He asked. I don't know yet, she said. I think I'm going to find out over the next few weeks. She looked at her hands. I've been moving so fast since I found my mother's letter. Finding you, driving here, everything that happened today. I haven't had a quiet moment to actually, she stopped. My father kept working for 3 more years. He documented everything. He gave them your name. She looked at Cole. He didn't forget you. No, Cole said. He couldn't have known if you'd kept your promise, she said. He had no way of knowing. He just believed you would. Cole thought about a man he'd known for 6 hours who had handed him a leather notebook wrapped in oilcloth and said, this is the important one. This is the one they want, and had trusted a stranger in a desert parking lot with the most important thing he had. He was a good judge of people, Cole said. He was, she said. Then quietly, so were you. You judged him right too. The photography took 40 minutes. Mara sat at the table and watched every page being documented, and Cole understood that she was watching her father's handwriting, reading pieces of it, absorbing the evidence of his mind and his precision and his courage, and he gave her that time without interrupting it. When it was done, Race's team packed the notebook with the care of people who understood exactly what they were handling, and Mara watched it go into the evidence case and her face was composed, and Cole watched her be composed and understood the cost of it. Dellinger found Cole at the bar at 9 o'clock when Race's team had mostly cleared out and the clubhouse had settled into the particular after-intensity quiet of a room where something significant has finished happening. I made a call, Dellinger said, before I came here today, to a contact in the New Mexico record system. He sat down. His voice was careful. Daniel Marsh's remains. Under the name he was given in the program Robert Allen Case, he was buried in a county cemetery outside Albuquerque in 1988. Unmarked grave. The program covered the costs and filed no next of kin notification because, as far as the official record was concerned, Daniel Marsh didn't exist. He paused. But the location is documented. The grave exists. It's findable. Cole went very still. You know where he's buried, Wendy said. I know where Robert Allen Case is buried, Dellinger said. And I know that Robert Allen Case was Daniel Marsh. And I know that his daughter is 20 feet away from us. Cole looked at Mara. She was talking quietly with Reaper, of all people, a conversation that had started from what Cole had been able to observe from across the room, with Reaper walking over and saying something brief and direct that had made her look at him with the particular attention she gave things that surprised her. Whatever Reaper had said, it had been real. Cole could see that from the way she was listening. Does she know? Cole asked Dellinger. Not yet, Dellinger said. I wanted to tell you first. Cole thought about it. I'll tell her, he said, tonight before she leaves. He paused. She came here to find her father, in every sense. She should know where he is. Dellinger nodded. He put a hand on Cole's shoulder briefly, the kind of contact between men who aren't demonstrative, but understand that some moments require acknowledging, and then he got up and went to find his coat. Marcus appeared beside Cole. Hatch says the vehicles in the lot are all gone, he said. Pina's people, nobody left behind. Race's people sweep the perimeter. Before they left, Marcus said, we're clear. Cole exhaled. Good, he said. Cole. Marcus's voice shifted lower, more personal. I've been sitting here for the last hour thinking about what I did. The 3 months I spent trying to verify your story without telling you. I thought I was doing you a favor, not getting your hopes up. He shook his head. But what I was really doing was not fully believing you. If I'd believed you completely, I would have told you what I was doing. I would have worked with you, not around you. You found Dellinger, Cole said. By accident, almost, Marcus said. I was following a court records thread, and his name came up in connection with the 1986 case. I reached out not expecting anything. He paused. When he responded, I knew it was real. I knew your story was real, and I still didn't tell you. But you brought him today, Cole said. I brought him today, Marcus said. Then it worked out, Cole said. That's generous. I'm a generous man, Cole said, and heard Pina's voice in the words and felt the difference between what those words meant from Pina and what they meant from him, and the difference was everything. Marcus almost smiled. Yeah, he said, you are. Right. Cole told Mara about the grave at 10 o'clock. They were alone at the far end of the bar. Everyone else had given them space without being asked, which was the kind of awareness Cole had always respected in these men, the ability to read when a conversation belonged to two people and not to a room. He told her plainly, Dellinger's contact, the records, Albuquerque, Robert Allen Case, the unmarked grave in a county cemetery. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. He's been there this whole time, she said. He has, Cole said. 40 years, she said, in an unmarked grave with someone else's name. Yes, Cole said. She pressed her hand flat on the bar surface, a steadying gesture, the kind that grounds you when the room is moving around you. I want to go there, she said. She stopped. I need to see where he is. I need to stand there. I know, Cole said. Will you come with me, she asked. Cole looked at her. He'd been expecting the question and not expecting it simultaneously, had felt it building across the last several hours. The logic of it, the rightness of it, and had not known until this moment whether he wanted to say yes or whether yes was something he was capable of after 71 years and 40 years of carrying this and a day that had taken more out of him than he'd fully accounted for yet. Yes, he said, I'll come with you. She nodded. Not tonight, she said. I can't do it tonight, but soon. Soon, he agreed. She looked at the bar surface for a moment. Then she looked at him with the direct, unguarded look that appeared when she was about to say something that mattered more to her than she wanted it to show. My mother's letter, she said, the 12 pages. There's a section near the end where she talks about what she would have wanted to say to the man who stayed with my father that night. She wrote it like a letter inside the letter. She paused. She said she'd imagined saying it for years but never knew if she'd have the chance. She wanted him to know that whatever he'd done in that parking lot, staying fighting, keeping her husband alive until morning, it had given her and Mara 3 more years of knowing he was somewhere in the world, that he was still trying, that he hadn't been abandoned. Her voice was steady but working at it. She said that mattered more than she could say, that a person can survive almost anything if they know someone is still fighting for them. Cole didn't speak. He couldn't for a moment. I'm telling you because you should know, Mara said. She wanted you to know. Cole looked at his hands on the bar. He thought about Caroline Marsh, a woman he'd never met, who had spent 40 years building a quiet life around the shape of what she'd lost, who had kept a journal and hidden it under floorboards and written a 12-page letter for her daughter to find, who had written a section for a stranger she'd never met because she'd needed him to know that what he'd done had mattered. Thank you, he said. His voice was rough. He didn't try to smooth it. Thank her, Mara said. She's the one who wrote it. I'll thank her the way you thank people who aren't here anymore, Cole said, by not wasting what she did. Mara looked at him for a long moment. My father trusted the right person, she said again. The same thing she'd said earlier, but it meant something different now, heavier and more specific and fully earned. Get some sleep, Cole said. You've been awake since Oregon. I have a room at the Holiday Inn on Speedway, she said. Good, he said. Go. She stood up. She picked up her leather portfolio bag and settled it on her shoulder, and she looked around the room at Reaper and Drew and Marcus and Hatch and Morales at the table where the notebook had sat at the bar, where Cole had told his story for 20 years, and her face held all of it. She put her hand on Cole's arm briefly, then she walked out. The clubhouse emptied slowly after that. Marcus left first, then Hatch and Morales, then Drew, who paused at the door and looked back at Cole with an expression that had grown up considerably since the beginning of the day and said nothing, which was the right choice. Dellinger shook Cole's hand at the door with both of his. I'll be in contact with Race tomorrow morning, he said. The authentication timeline, the filing structure, I want to stay involved, if that's acceptable. It's more than acceptable, Cole said. You were part of this before today. You should be part of what comes after. I should have been part of it 30 years ago, Dellinger said. You're here now, Cole said. That's what counts. Dellinger went. Reaper was last. He'd been behind the bar for the final hour, cleaning glasses with the methodical focus of a man who needed something to do with his hands while his mind worked through things. He set the last glass down and came around and stood near Cole, and they were alone in the room together for the first time all day. "What happens to you now?" Reaper asked. "What do you mean?" Cole said. "You've been carrying this story for 40 years, Reaper said. "It's been the thing, the reason you came in every week, the reason you kept going." He looked at Cole directly. "Now it's done. The notebook is in federal custody. The case is moving. Mara found you." He paused. "What does Cole do now?" Cole thought about it honestly. "I go to New Mexico," he said. "I stand at Daniel Marsh's grave with his daughter. I make sure that grave gets a proper marker with his real name on it." He paused. "Then I come back here, because this is still my club. This is still my Tuesday nights. Nothing about that changes." Reaper looked at him. "I want to make something right," he said. "Formally, in front of the chapter." He paused. "You founded this club. You built it from nothing. And for 6 years, I let people treat you like a punchline. That doesn't get to stand without being corrected publicly in front of the people who participated in it." Cole looked at him. "Reaper, this isn't a request for your permission," Reaper said. "This is me telling you what's going to happen. You can be gracious about it, or you can be uncomfortable about it, but either way, it's happening." Cole almost smiled. "Then I'll be gracious," he said. "Good," Reaper said. He picked up his jacket. He stopped at the door. "Cole, for what it's worth." He stopped, started again. "I believed you more than I let on. I want you to know that. There were nights I went home thinking about what you said and wondering if—" He stopped again. "I should have let myself wonder out loud." "Yeah," Cole said, "you should have." Reaper nodded. He went out. Cole sat alone in the clubhouse for a while after that. He didn't turn off the lights. He didn't close up. He just sat at the far end of the bar, his bar, the bar he'd helped build 30 years ago. The bar where he'd told his story 100 times to rooms that laughed, and he let the quiet of the place settle around him. He thought about all of it, the whole shape of it, from that parking lot in 1985 to this bar in this moment. The chain of decisions and commitments and stubbornness and love, because that's what it was. Ultimately, he understood now. Love for a man he'd barely known, and a promise he'd made to that man, and the 40-year refusal to let love shrink into something more manageable. He thought about a little girl named Mara, who was now a woman asleep in a hotel room on Speedway Boulevard, who had driven through the night to find him, who had her father's eyes and her father's stillness and her father's absolute refusal to look away from things that needed to be looked at directly. He thought about Daniel Marsh in a county cemetery outside Albuquerque with the wrong name on a grave that didn't even have a marker. And he thought about what it would cost to fix that, not much. It turned out when you measured it against 40 years, and he thought about driving to New Mexico with Mara and standing on that ground and saying the right name out loud in the right place for the first time. He thought about the notebook sealed now in federal evidence carrying Daniel's precise and courageous handwriting into the machinery of justice that Daniel had tried to reach in 1985 and had not reached, and had spent 3 more years in a hospital bed trying to reach, and was reaching now finally through the hands of a man who had stayed in a parking lot when he could have driven away. He thought about Karen Reese and Frank Dellinger and the 6 names in the notebook who were about to discover that the past does not wait politely while you build a comfortable present on top of it. He thought about Walter Pena sitting somewhere tonight with his attorneys assembling the defense that Cole had been told would be long and expensive and complicated, and he felt no particular triumph about that and no particular anxiety either. Pena would fight. The truth would wait. Truth was good at waiting. Cole had learned that better than anyone. His phone buzzed, a text from Mara. Just 4 words. "I made it. Thank you." Cole looked at the message for a long moment. He typed back, "Get some sleep. We have a drive to take." He set the phone down. He sat for another few minutes in the quiet in his bar in the club he'd founded and never left, and he breathed, and he let himself feel the full weight of what this day had been. Not the events of it exactly, but the meaning underneath the events. The thing that 40 years of telling and not being believed had been building toward without his full understanding. He'd made a promise to a dying man. He'd kept it. That was the whole story. Everything else, the notebook, the network, the federal case, Pena's reckoning, the 6 names about to face the consequences. They'd spent decades avoiding all of that, was the result of one thing and one thing only. A man on a motorcycle who had heard a body hit gravel in a parking lot and had not ridden away. 3 weeks later, Cole and Mara drove to Albuquerque. They drove in Mara's car she'd wanted to drive, and Cole had let her, and they'd talked for most of the 11 hours in the way that people talk when they have discovered they are the same kind of person and have decades of things to say to each other that they haven't said yet. She told him about her life Oregon, the bookkeeping work she'd done for 15 years, the marriage that hadn't held the daughter she had in Portland, who was 28 and knew she was coming here, and had called 3 times on the road to check in. Cole told her things about the years of searching he'd never told anyone. The dead ends, the sealed records, the government man in the parking garage who'd made the meeting feel dangerous, the years when he'd almost given up, and the thing that had stopped him each time from giving up completely. "What was the thing?" she asked. "Your father's face," Cole said. "When he looked at me in that parking lot, the way he looked at me." He paused. "You don't forget a look like that. It follows you." She was quiet for a moment. "He was good at that," she said. "My mother said so. She said when Daniel looked at you, you felt like the most important thing in the room." She paused. She said it was the thing she missed most, being looked at like that. The county cemetery was outside Albuquerque, set in the dry, open land that smells like sage and dust and the particular ancient quiet of places where the desert has been the desert for a very long time. Robert Allen Case, a small marker temporary placed by the county system decades ago. No flowers, no personal items, just a name that wasn't his name in a place that had known nothing about who he really was. They stood there for a while without speaking. Then Mara crouched down and put her hand on the marker, and she said her father's name out loud, his real name, Daniel Marsh, the way you say a name when you need the air around a place to finally hold the right sound. Cole stood behind her and let her have that. When she stood back up, her eyes were red, but she was not crying, and she looked at the marker and then at the sky and then at Cole. "He deserves a proper stone," she said. "He does," Cole said. "We'll get him one. With his real name." "With his real name," Cole said, "and his dates and whatever you want on it." She thought about it for a moment. "He didn't look away," she said. Cole looked at her. "That's what I wanted to say," she said. "Just that. He didn't look away." Cole nodded. "That's right," he said. "That's exactly right." They stood there together, the two of them, a daughter and the man who'd kept a promise for 40 years, in the quiet of a New Mexico afternoon while somewhere in Phoenix, the federal machinery built from Daniel Marsh's handwriting continued to turn. 6 weeks after that, Frank Dellinger called Cole on a Tuesday morning. "Handwriting authentication came back," he said. "Conclusive. The notebook is authenticated as Daniel Marsh's. The document aging is consistent with the 1985 timeline. Ink composition confirms it." A pause, and in the pause, Cole heard something that Dellinger didn't normally allow into his voice, something close to relief so large it had taken on the quality of exhaustion. "It's real, Cole. Officially, forensically, legally real." "I know it's real," Cole said. "It was always real." "I know," Dellinger said, "but now everyone knows." The first charges were filed 11 days after that. Pena was charged on 12 counts, including conspiracy, obstruction, and criminal enterprise across a 40-year period. His network, 5 of the 6 names, the 6th having died the previous year, was charged alongside him. The filing made the Phoenix papers that afternoon, in the national wire services by evening, and the details that emerged in the public record were the details from the notebook, the details from Carolyn Marsh's journal, the details that Daniel Marsh had documented with the precision of a man who understood that precision was the only weapon he had. Race called Cole that evening. "How are you?" she asked. "I've been better," he said. "I've been a lot worse." "The case is going to be long," she said. "Pena's team filed their first motion this morning. It's going to be exactly what he promised you, long and expensive and complicated." "I know," Cole said. "Does that bother you?" Cole thought about it. "No," he said, "because the truth is in the process now. And that's where it needed to be. Whatever happens on the other end 5 years from now, 10 years, it's in there. It's documented. It's real." He paused. "Pena can fight the process. He can't fight the record." "No," Ray said. "He can't." The Tuesday after the charges were filed, Cole went to the clubhouse. Same time, same jacket on the second hook from the door, same beer he wouldn't finish, same seat at the far end of the bar. But the room was different. Not dramatically, not obviously, just in the particular way that rooms become different when the people in them have been changed by something and carry that change with them without announcing it. Reaper was behind the bar. He poured Cole's beer without being asked, which he'd never done before, and set it in front of him with a look that said several things at once without saying any of them. Drew was at the card table. He looked up when Cole came in and nodded a different nod than the one from before, with more in it. Marcus was already at the bar. He slid over to make room without being asked. A new prospect, a kid Cole didn't know yet, maybe 25, with the particular bright alertness of someone trying to read a room they don't fully understand, yet came over with the slight nervousness of people new to a space when someone whose stature they don't entirely grasp enters it. "Are you Cole?" he asked. "I am," Cole said. "I heard about what happened," the prospect said, "with the notebook and the federal case and all of it." He paused. "Is it true you kept that notebook for 40 years, protected it, because a man asked you to?" Cole looked at him. He picked up his beer. "You want to hear the story," he said. The prospect sat down. Reaper leaned against the back bar with his arms crossed and said nothing, which was his way of saying, "Tell it." Marcus turned on his stool. Drew came over from the card table. Cole looked at the room. His room, his Tuesday night, his club. He began. He told it the same way he always told it: the motel, the vending machine, the sound of a body hitting gravel, the man who grabbed his wrist in the dark and trusted a stranger with everything he had. He told it with the same details, the same pauses, the same weight on the same words. But something was different now. Not the story, the room. Nobody shifted in their seat. Nobody reached for their glass with the slow movement of someone who has decided they are done listening. Nobody's eyes moved toward the door or the television or anywhere else. Every person in that room was listening, really listening. The kind of listening that costs something, that requires setting down your own noise and your own certainty and your own comfortable habit of disbelief and simply receiving what another person is telling you. Cole told it all the way to the end. He told them about Mara driving through the night. He told them about the notebook open on his kitchen table in the early morning light. He told them about Walter Pena walking through that door with the ease of a man who has never yet been in a room he couldn't control. He told them about race and the authentication and the grave in Albuquerque and the stone that now bore Daniel Marsh's real name and the words Mara had chosen. He didn't look away. When he finished, the room was completely quiet. The prospect said in a voice that was trying not to show how much it had been moved. "And the charges, the case, it's moving," Cole said. "It's going to be long. It's going to be fought hard. But the record exists now. The truth is in the process." He paused. "That's what Daniel Marsh built it for. That's what it was always for." The prospect nodded slowly. Then he said, "Did you ever doubt yourself in 40 years? Did you ever think maybe it didn't happen the way I remember? Maybe I'm wrong." Cole looked at him. He thought about 40 years of Tuesday nights. He thought about the laughter and the skepticism and the long rides home through the desert dark, asking himself the same question this kid was asking him now. "Every time someone laughed," Cole said, "every single time." He paused. "And then I'd remember the way Daniel Marsh looked at me. And I'd remember that I'd made him a promise. And I'd decide again the same way I decided the first time in that parking lot, that you don't walk away from a promise just because keeping it is hard." The room held that. Reaper behind the bar looked at Cole with something on his face that Cole had never seen there before. Not amusement, not calculation, not the managed patience of a man running a room. Something honest and unguarded and earned. "Nobody laughs anymore," Reaper said. He said it quietly. He said it like a statement of fact and a promise at the same time. Cole looked at him. He looked at the room. His room, his club, his Tuesday nights that had been worth coming back to for 40 years because the truth does not die, and the right person is always eventually still waiting to hear it. "No," Cole said. He picked up his beer. "Nobody laughs anymore." And in a county cemetery outside Albuquerque, on a stone that finally held the right name, 4 words were carved into granite that would outlast everything Walter Pena's money could build and everything 40 years of silence had tried to bury. He didn't look away. That was the truth. That had always been the truth. And now, finally, completely irrevocably, the truth had survived.